Hi, this is Bill Punch from Michigan State University. Another video in the series of videos on the topic, the practice of computing using Python, CSE 231. We're going to continue our discussions of the standard methods for classes. In particular, we're going to look at how to add addition to one of our own defined classes. Let's go ahead and get started. How does Python do this stuff? It maintains a relationship between the operators that we know about and love so much, plus and times and square brackets and iteration, and it maps them to special names that are predefined. And it turns out there's probably about 60 of these methods that are predefined that map to one of these operators. What it would look like is something like this. When I provide an operation such as v1 plus v2, Python automatically will change that plus maps to the special method, 2 underlines, add 2 underlines. The first, the left-hand side, maps to the calling instance. The second maps to an operator. For every one of these signs, there's a whole list of these methods. So plus, double underline add, sub, double underline sub, so on and so forth. And these two forms are exactly equivalent. You can use either one. Clearly, this is a nicer form, but these are exactly the same form, and Python will interpret those for us anytime we want to do it. How can we do that then? If we want to have it so that we can add two elements together, then we must provide in our class the method associated with the operator that we're trying to do work with. Here's an example of a clock class. These are the three for this case, 3 cases that we're going to provide. We're going to make an init method like we always do. We're going to do an add method that will allow us to add 2 clocks together. And here's one we haven't talked about, double underline str, double underline. That's a conversion operator. If I say string some clock instance, it's going to return a form, some string of a clock. And this is what gets called when we print C1. So when I want to print a clock instance, implicitly that means I'm going to turn it into a string and print a string. So if we define the string operator, we can do printing. Here's our clock class. Here's the initialization. Clocks are set up so that we're only going to record hours and minutes, no more than 59 minutes in a clock and no more than 24 hours in a clock. And so we're going to do the conversion of elements so that they're at the right limits in the initializer. Self.minutes is the remainder of the value of minutes, the parameter divided remainder 60. Self.hours takes whatever hours was the parameter, the integral part of the minutes divided by 60, add those two together, and then modulo 24, that's the remainder. So whatever value I pass into a clock creation, I get the limits set, nothing greater than 24, nothing greater than 60. When I add 2 clocks, it's pretty straightforward. If I say C1 plus C2, C1 maps to self, C2 maps to the right-hand side, and we get those 2 values in to try to do operations on. I take the hours from the left-hand side and the hours from the right-hand side, I add them together. I take the minutes from the left-hand side, the minutes from the right-hand side, I add them together. And what I should return is a clock. If I add 2 integers, I get an integer. If I add 2 floats, I get a float. If I add 2 clocks, I should get a new clock. I call the constructor, and I give it the hours from here, and I give it the minutes from here. And remember, the constructor deals with all the limits, and so I just pass it in. If I would like to do a string, we define the string function. It should return a string, and we're going to format it such that it's 2 decimal places wide for a digit, 2 decimal places wide for a digit. If it's only 1 decimal place wide, it's going to start with a 0, a colon in between the hours and the minutes. Let's take a look, see how that works. Let's define the class. And then let's run our little example here. So how well did this work? Here we had a clock that had 60 seconds and 24 hours, 60 minutes, sorry, and 24 hours. The 60 had a 1 carry and it got set to 0. The 24 went to 0 plus the 1 carry meant that this was 1 hour and no minutes, which is exactly what printed out. Then we made a clock with 1 hour and 1 minute, that's C2. We printed that clock, and it prints out in a nice format. The leading 0, 2 digits wide, the colon in between, just like we did in our formatting statement. When I add the 2 clocks together, I get 1 hour with no minutes, 1 hour with 1 minute creates 2 hours with 1 minute, and this is another clock. We can look to see that we got what we wanted. Did C1 change? It didn't. It's still a clock. Did its values change? It did not. We can print C3, or what type is C3? It also is a clock, and we got the right values.